We continue to bring you coverage on news coming out of Baystate Medical, as they've announced they'll soon be closing their reproductive biology lab. Now, IVF patients are concerned about how and where they can send their frozen embryos.
Western Mass News reporter Reagan Stoddard joins us live in studio after getting answers. Reagan.
Abby and Chris, the process of IVF is already a long one, and now concerns about how this entire process of having to move their embryos could be mentally and financially taxing.
In healthcare, it's about trauma-informed care.
In a letter sent out to Baystate Medical Center IVF patients, Baystate informed patients that their reproductive biology lab would be closing and that they had until January 17, 2025 to move their frozen embryos to a new lab. Now, concerns rising with the short time period given to patients to make such a big decision. Western Mass News spoke with Danielle Stone, the owner and clinical director with the Life Workshop. They work in reproductive mental health.
And for many people already involved in reproductive medicine, there's a lot of collective trauma that already exists.
Stone says in this journey, patients must have trust in their healthcare providers.
And if you don't have that trust, it builds mistrust, which builds resentment, which builds stress and anxiety and worry.
An event like having to transfer one's embryos can have a huge impact on the mental state of patients.
That comes with a lot of time and a lot of grief and a lot of strain, both finance and otherwise.
For those looking to transfer their embryos, it's not only mentally taxing, but going to cost them financially. Sherry Cavane, a Hamden resident, is one of the many women across Western Massachusetts who now have to look for a new place to store their frozen embryos.
And now I have to transfer, we have to pay out of pocket a transfer fee to a long-term facility, and then I'll have to transfer again once I find a new doctor. So it's two transfer fees that we'll have to pay for that.
In a statement from Baystate Medical, they say in part, quote, "We recognize this decision is deeply personal and we are taking steps to support our patients. Baystate Health is actively reaching out to families with stored sperm, eggs, and embryos by mail and by phone to ensure the best possible solutions, including the option to transfer specimens for those who would like to continue to preserve them." Baystate also says anyone who believes they have sperm, eggs, or embryos stored with us, even if they have not received a letter, is encouraged to call 413-794-1958 to speak with a member of the care team. Again, all IVF patients have till January 17th, 2025 to move their frozen embryos to a new lab. Reporting in studio, Reagan Stoddard, Western Mass News.